Welcome to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Tim Wilkins.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. It's been a long 3 weeks. It's been a eventful, pretty much we've had everything but the kitchen sink thrown at us here in the world of politics. If you're playing baseball, I believe a 6-4-3 double play is in order. If you're keeping track at home, we had a whole life's worth of events happen within the last 3 weeks between a drunken national anthem at a home run derby, which, by the way, the ballpark here in Arlington had a great time with the home run derby. It was a phenomenal time. For $500 a ticket, you can watch people you never heard of before hit home runs, besides 3 people out of the whole list of people that actually were, competing. But that's in sports. Unfortunately, now we are on the dog days of summer in sports, which means we must now take a turn to the world of politics. And in the last 3 weeks, we've had, Chris, I think you're joining me once again. I appreciate you joining me as always. We've actually had literally everything but the kitchen sink thrown at us here in the world of politics. And it's, it's been a hell of a last 3 weeks. But
yeah,
go ahead, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think we all looked at, when you think back to New Year's Eve and New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, you thought, all right, maybe, enjoy this little respite of craziness here, because we knew 2024 definitely had all the recipe to be a crazy year. And we're just past halfway, and I mean, what more can you say than what's happened here in the last couple of weeks? I mean, it's truly astonishing.
Well, I mean, I'll kind of dive into it a little bit here, just so we're keeping track at home. We're kind of going full throttle here. So if everyone's keeping track at home and wants to, we're going through the cookie timeline of things here. Legitimately, we had the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And it looked like basically a redheaded stepchild getting his ass kicked for about a good hour and a half. It was, there was calls, which I knew the gig was up for Joe Biden when CNN and NBC and Washington Compost and New York Slimes and all the other good, liberal media was basically, taking him out the pasture, and, literally was trying to push him out the door. And I will say this, Chris, I don't know about you, but this 3 weeks now, we're only a few days away from what decided to happen here. That started it. And unfortunately, 3 days ago, he announced he's no longer running for office. And I hate to say this, for every liberal out there that voted for the primary, I hope you feel like, how does it feel to be voting for the party that is actually destroying democracy? That's all I'm going to say. To every single one of you that vote for a Democratic candidate this time around, you are literally voting for the party that is destroying democracy, because you're pushing out a guy because he's going to lose to Donald Trump. They already had a primary, Chris. They already had 14, well, they say about 22 million people voted for him in the primary. He had the bound delegates. He was going to be the nominee. So
Yeah.
my argument really is, if he's not running for office, and I have followed JD Vance on this, which I'll get to that discussion in a minute, of his announcement of being the vice presidential nominee for the Republican ticket, and that timeline of how that occurred, because it changed everything on how that happened.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just one of those things, man. It's just terrible. Just terrible.
Well, I mean, I saw something last night, and I can't remember who broke it down. It might have been Dan Bongino. He's really been the only one I've really listened to over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
But
really. Since the thing happened in Butler, I've actually that's probably the only one I've actually listened to. So
yeah, and so Dan brought up a good point about the history of, or no, actually, you know who it was? It was Steven Crowder. I listened to Steven Crowder, Louder with Crowder yesterday. I listened to,
are you
which I
part of
don't,
the Mug Club?
I'm not, but I thought
Oh,
this
you need to
was,
get a part of the Mug Club.
I thought this was
Selfless plug. Selfless plug.
fascinating that he said, he kind of went through a timeline of cheating that the Democrats have done, really in the last, several election cycles. He would look back at 2000 with Gore, where essentially Al Gore, when it came down to Florida, essentially he wanted the state to only count in the heavy heavy Democrat areas. So Miami-Dade County, I can't remember all the Pinellas County. I think there were 3 or 4 of them, and he only wanted them to count in those particular districts, right? Which obviously they weren't going to allow. Like if you're going to do a full recount, you have to do the whole state, not just cherry pick counties. 2016. I mean, Bernie Sanders was going to be as scary as it is with a full blown socialist, but Bernie Sanders was going to be the Democrat nominee. I mean, he was, regardless of how you feel, he was the most popular Democrat, and he essentially got screwed, and and obviously Hillary Clinton was the nominee. So again, really to me, this is no different than what kind of the Democrat playbook is. So obviously we'll see how things play out over the next few months as we get closer to obviously November.
And I'll just talk about this kind of briefly here. In going with the timeline of the debate, I knew Ben that if this was the timeline to get him out of that seat to run for office. My argument is like JD Vance. If you cannot run for office as a sitting incumbent, then you need to resign the presidency of the United States. And the 25th Amendment is still on the table, and based on his health status, that's going to be determined whether or not they use it or not. But it legitimately is a reasonable argument that is a measured response based on a couple things. One, I'm just backing this up. We're recording this episode on July 23rd. A lot of things have transpired in 3 weeks, guys, that I don't think the world has ever seen before, ever in the world of politics. Like I just between the debate, the way it was just was terrible for the Biden's performance. Trump was Trump in a lot of sense where he just kept, he saw shark. He was like blood in the water, and it was like a shark, and he just kept hammering immigration until the point where he just, it was just bad. And to the point, that's how that debate performance went. Then you have arguably, and I will say this, in our lifetime, I think we never had this happen, where, Chris, I don't know about you, but the day of the Butler, Pennsylvania thing, a rally, and the shooting of, in the assassination attempt, that's what it is, of Donald Trump. I'm literally was tuned in to watch that. I think every news network, liberal and conservative news, national media, had a live shot of that route. The speech was because that was supposedly the rumor that they were going to announce JD Vance as the vice presidential nominee. That was the rumor. So obviously everyone was tuned in, waiting for him to announce, because Trump, being Trump, wanted to have the surprise and almost like a wrestling return bravado, like who's going to be the surprise, who's going to be this. And then, the incident occurs not even 6 minutes into his speech, which, Chris, I know you don't watch as much Trump rallies as I do, but this was the first time that a graph was used. And I'll talk briefly about this because I know Trump's kind of gone over this a little bit, jokingly in his RNC speech, making fun of himself. He never really ad-libs using charts and graphs. He'll ad-lib off the prompter, doing whatever he wants to say, but he'll never use visuals like he was trying to use. And the little slight head of the turn of his head obviously changes the trajectory of the bullet. And we're thinking about a different situation here. But that is one scenario that I think, Chris, I mean, even you probably were just doing your daily routine, man. Like, it wasn't, a lot of people weren't really watching the rally. They were going to probably catch it on a rerun, or maybe, if there's anything newsworthy, they'll catch it, on a YouTube or something. So it was live shotted by every news network. So all those live microphones picked up on every word that those Secret Service agents were saying, including Donald Trump saying, "Let me get my shoes," things like that. And it just kind of took the humanity, and of course he gets up and does what he does. And Chris, I don't know about you, man, but they humanized the man the week after in the RNC. They humanized him. And they did a hell of a job at the RNC. I will say that's probably one of the best conventions I've watched. And of course, I'm 30 something years old. The RNC convention was pretty much from beginning to end, a very well thought of, well put together convention. So I want to have your thoughts on the RNC convention here in a second. I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch near as much of the convention. I'll admit, at times I have to take a mental detox at times from politics, and I did watch some of the speeches. I did watch, obviously, when President Trump made his first appearance there. The earliest that a president has come to an RNC, really in history. So obviously a great moment. And then obviously, and then the speeches that closed out the RNC later in the week, including President Trump's speech. No, I thought it was a great event. Again, I'm just one of those in terms of, I've heard so many of these speeches over and over again. You see again, you have civilians, you have celebrities, you have politicians, and obviously they're all pushing for, what they believe and what the platform is going to be. But there are times where it's like, all right, I've heard this before, and all right, how much this is just political BS and how much is this actually going to happen. So, in regards to President Trump's speech, I thought it was a good speech. He obviously started off really, he talked about, the humanizing aspect of it and the unity aspect of it. I'm of the opinion the speech was too long.
Well, I don't
I think
disagree with you. I don't disagree with the speech itself being too long, dude. I was talking about prior to him getting up on stage, you saw him as a man sitting in the audience, okay, with his grandkids, with his friends, and you see the human element of it. Listen, I agree completely, Chris, that the speech was, if you cut that speech down to only a half hour, it resonates and it hits stronger than any speech he's ever given. The fact of the matter is, I have to be a human being and give that man grace and say that man got shot less than 4 days ago.
absolutely. Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, he wants to ramble and talk about whatever the hell he wants to talk about, then I'm going to let it. And that's the thing too, is also, a lot of people joked on the internet and said, he didn't get a chance to speak in Butler, so he's doing both. I said, I get you, you fuckers. I get it.
Yeah.
I get that. But
And again,
you're right though. It went too long, and that's where like the pomp and circumstance. I know I was texting you earlier in the week of like, what's his introduction song going to be? And I said, Many Men by 50 Cent was up there on my list.
Yeah.
And of course, Kid Rock. I knew as soon as Kid Rock was showing up, I was like, yeah, he's walking out to Badass. And I kind of knew it. And I said, okay. And it's just Dana White doing his thing. Hulk Hogan, I thought was going to have a heart attack on live.
Yeah, you could tell Terry was out of gas there, but that was a cool moment. I think if you're 80s or a 90s kid and you grew up, I mean, that brought back a lot of memories, and it's good to see.
Dude, all we needed then was Stone Cold Steve Austin at that point, dude. Really, it's all we needed. I mean, seriously.
But it is good. It's good. We've seen more celebrities and athletes who are, I think for a while there were scared because the kooky left and all the lunatics there were ready to cancel them. And I think you're seeing now that athletes or people who obviously support President Trump are not afraid to. And we saw a few of the baseball players there with the fight. They were doing the fight chant, or they were doing the ear and the fist, and the fist up in the air. I mean, I think we've hit a point now where people are just like, listen, I don't give a shit at this point. Like, I support President Trump, and if you got a problem with it, that's your own personal problem.
Well,
so
and listen, as a guy that has been on the Trump train for a long time and has gotten exactly the visceral of the left attacking me on multiple ends, including the corporate world. I can tell you, it's you get looked like you get shunned because you're a Trump supporter. In reality, many people that are just a Trump supporter in hiding, and they're afraid to talk about their beliefs publicly because they're afraid of some kind of ridicule. And in reality, that's not how it should be. And listen, I didn't really agree with Joe Biden calling for a lowering of the temperature. I really didn't. And I completely agree with a lot of what the sentiment was on the right, saying you literally eviscerated this man for 7+ years, called him every name you can include, including Hitler at the time, and called him, and they went back on the offensive and still calling them out. They were calling him a threat to democracy up until yesterday. So, you know, it's kind of funny to me how
you're dealing
with
very
hypocrites.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
You're dealing with very unstable people here. I mean, that's true. I mean, when for 8 years, if people hear that that Hitler is in the White House and all this craziness, eventually someone's going to come. Now, do we know all the motives or who he's connections? No, we don't. But the
No, we don't.
reality is that we've got when you continue to allow that type of stuff to be said, eventually some lunatic's going to take matters into his own hands.
Well, I'll say this, and it's kind of point blank. After the convention was over, it was over. The RNC was over. I think JD Vance's story is going to be told across the country, and they're going to understand the human as well. They're going to see a man that's steadfast in his beliefs, but he came from humble and worked his way through these things in life and got himself to where he is today. It's a unique story to listen to, and it's something that I think many people around the world need to listen to, because it's a story that's actually blue collar as it gets, but it's also a lot of stories across a lot of people's lives across the world and in the United States as well. So JD Vance being added to the ticket now, personally, I'll say this: was he my number one pick? No, I think I was texting you the week before. I was throwing out names that you probably weren't even thinking about. I was throwing out Glenn Youngkin. I was throwing out Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I was just throwing out names for the hell of it at that point. This because it's fun. It was the RNC has a very strong bench, so it's definitely a good story there. But I will say this: that him President Joe Biden stepping down from the race is gonna scare the shit out of fucking Republicans, because it's just not a good situation here. We're gonna go we were up about 8 or 9 points across the board nationally. Now we're gonna tighten it back up again. And unfortunately, people are going to vote for Kamala Harris because of race and gender instead of policy. So you're going to have that problem. And then you're going to have the thing Kamala Harris has that a lot of people don't realize is she can't fucking talk. She talks in Venn diagrams and in rhyme. If anyone's ever listened to her talk in the last 3-4 years now, it has nothing substantive to come out of her mouth. Not a damn thing. So it's going to be hilarious. Whoever she debates against is going to be an ass kicking in figurative speech. It's just going to be exactly what we saw with Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. It's going to be one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. It's never going to stop. The polling, I'll tell you this, the polling, if you look at the polling now, it's obviously tightened up, but as of 13 polls that got released this morning, just so everyone's keeping track at home, as of this morning, the favorability ratings on both candidates here, Donald Trump's at a 47. This is the highest he's ever been by Quinnipiac, which, if you keep track at home, Quinnipiac is a left-leaning poll institute. Not
all
favored.
These polls are left-leaning. No,
well, I mean, there's a few. There's Rasmussen in here. There's a few of them actually are kind of right-leaning. You got Trigalgo, what do you call it? Trigalgo, doing the mouthful there. But here's the thing. So the big question that I have now, and Chris, I want to see here what your thoughts are, is who's she going to pull for her VP pick? And I'm hoping she pulls your governor.
He's not my governor.
Well, I mean, he's technically in the office of the governorship of the Tar Heel state, Mr. Roy Cooper.
King Roy Cooper kept this
Conrad. It's Conrad Cooper. It's Conrad Cooper.
kept the
county.
state in emergency for almost 2 years.
So it's either there's a couple guys out there that are shifting. It's Mark Kelly's one, Shapiro from Pennsylvania, Cooper, Brashear, and Buttigieg. So those are the top 5 leaning heavy in the VP situation.
If I'm guessing, I think it's probably going to be Mark Kelly. I think he probably fits.
Well, he's gonna lose that Senate seat next time around, because right now Arizona is polling plus 12 right now to Trump right now.
Yep. It's either
in the average aggregate, dude, of polls, he's up by 8.
I mean, to me, it's either going to be Kelly or it's going to be Pennsylvania governor. I think those are probably the 2 front runners. So
yeah,
I mean, I think those are I think for some odd reason, Shapiro is relatively popular in Pennsylvania.
Shapiro is popular, and here's the thing: it also, and this is why, being a political stupid junkie like I am, it's Shapiro is a logical choice if they want to keep the electoral map competitive. If the electoral map gets out of hand and it's out of reach, if they're seeing polling data they're not going to win still, they're not going to put a guy that's a first-term governor up for the spot. Because the Constitution still applies, where if you're nominated for a seat and you're holding a seat, you have to technically give up the seat. So that's the rules. So that's the rules.
Let's be real. All Democrats have thrown the Constitution out, and
Well, they literally just did with their own party. They changed the rules completely and threw out a guy that it was duly elected by the primary. So it's that.
I mean, rules and Democrats don't. We could say, oh, that they're breaking the rules, but let's be real. They don't
have any rules. They don't believe in rules.
It's almost a waste of time to even say, because they don't have any rules.
So here's the thing: swing state polls as of this morning, it's a Democrat-leaning action committee. Pennsylvania is plus 6.5 to Trump. Arizona's up 8. Michigan is plus in the margin of error with Trump, and Wisconsin is technically plus 1 or within the margin of error. Here's the crazy thing. So that's the polling versus Kamala Harris. Now, if you look at the polling against Joe Biden, the polling data drastically changes against Joe Biden here, and this is where it even if they're going against Gavin Newsom, dude, I'm telling you, the reason why Gavin Newsom didn't get it is because the polling's worse for Newsom than Kamala Harris,
which I actually find hard to believe. I thought it would be better for him and worse for her.
Plus 9 in Pennsylvania. That's where they want to keep Pennsylvania within the margin of error to keep it competitive, man. Like they definitely do. If you look at the electoral map, Trump is going to do something that's unique that probably hasn't been done before. And I think it's kind of needs to be talked about here a little bit, is what he's doing. He's expanding. So usually the incumbent has to defend the blue wall, right? Which is what? Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. What they're not taking into account, and really on the electoral map here, is Georgia. And Georgia last election cycle went almost Biden by like plus 2. So he won that.
With some 2 a.m. but with some 2 a.m.
Fulton County, just like old Fannie Willis,
with some nice ballots at 2 a.m.
Yep. So here's the thing. So if Trump flips the tide, this is what the electoral map shows now. He's up so much in Arizona, he's going to flip Arizona back to him. Nevada's leaning towards Trump. Pennsylvania is kind of a pinkish right now. Wisconsin's pinkish. Michigan and Virginia is where Trump is going to expand. He's going to go after Georgia here eventually, but I think right now Virginia and Michigan are going to be his 2. I want to get some electoral. Heck, they were even showing him up at one point, dude. They were showing him up in New Hampshire, which has never happened in a presidential election where Republicans won New Hampshire. So it's going to be unique. I still don't. I'm not saying we need to take it easy here. I think we need to kind of, as good old Steve Bannon would say, next man up and put the pedal to the metal here and let's go to work.
You can't. I mean, you got to play like your 10 point. You got to play like you're 10 points down. You got to factor in. I mean, let's be real. I mean, there's going to be fraud everywhere. You got the nut job governor of Michigan who that's read something about like basically they can't go back and recount ballots or something or contest it.
Well,
there's some.
We're also forgetting something too, man. With this new turn of events here, with Joe Biden taking himself off the ballot, he's still going to be on the ballot in multiple states because of the state laws in those states. I believe it's Georgia and Wisconsin. So that's going to interfere with some things, and they can't change the ballots. That's the law. That's the law.
This is my question. How do we know that they're not gonna pull some shenanigans there?
Like, well, listen, they can try. They can try, but here's the thing, man. If the voting tallies come up so big, which I think legitimately is going to happen here, it really is going to happen. Is when you're seeing the results come in, and it's not going to be like the last time. You know why it's not going to be like the last time? Because people didn't get a chance to actually see Joe Biden or Kamala Harris on the campaign trail the last time. The last time in 2020, they hid themselves in the basement. They only came up like a game of whack-a-mole for the debate. And I hate to say it, but Trump didn't do really well in the debate. He was very aggressive, and he was, at least in my opinion, overly aggressive, chomping at the bit. And he kind of got himself in some trouble there because the way it was presented was that he was attacking, he was going after the mental cognitive things a little too soon. I think he was doing it then a little bit more aggressively than he is now. I think it's going to be different now. I think Kamala Harris, unfortunately, the question still remains and this is a serious thing, is that she has to shoulder whatever the administration has done for 4 years, which is nothing really. It's made your lives nothing as good has come out of this administration whatsoever. They can try to put lipstick on a pig, it's still a fucking pig. And I'll say it nicely to everybody. Your costs of living are still going to stay as high as they are now if you vote for them again. Nothing's going to change. So you got to vote for change here in November. You got to be smart about it. But she has to do that. She also has to stand on her record. She doesn't have one. She hasn't done anything. Her politics are so left-leaning, dude. It makes the progressives look moderate. And I don't think anyone's actually looked at her policies that she endorsed. She's left of AOC on a lot of topics. So, and also she can't talk publicly. Anytime anyone's ever watched her publicly speak, it's about buses and talking in rhyme and using Venn diagrams. Sorry, but it's going to be a fun time to watch here in the next 3 months, man. And if Trump just keeps on the message and not ad lib and talk about Hannibal Lecter and talk about all the other things that he talks about and just stays on prompter, he'll win himself an election. That's just the way I look at it. So, not saying he has to stay on prompter all the time. I think he could have cut that speech down to about 30 minutes. And I would have been just fine with it. So, hell, there's all the greatest hits on that speech, Chris. There was literally the China virus, Crazy Nancy. There was every great hit you can think of, man. So,
oh yeah,
it was a good time. But yeah, man. You got anything else you want to throw in here before we call it a wrap? Put a bow on this thing.
I mean, we'll see what happens here over the next couple of days. I think Biden's supposed to talk tomorrow, I think he's supposed to talk tomorrow. So, at this point, who knows, man? As crazy as this, something even crazier can happen at this point. So we're just kind of along for the ride.
And I'll say this to everyone keeping track at home. It really needs to come down to one simple thing. Joe, I think it's best for the country that you resign the office of the presidency. You go home. Seriously. It's he obviously, I'm not saying I'm not trying to be hatred or anything like that, but it's time to go home, man. And I don't think it's a wise decision to have him in the office of the presidency going forward. I don't think it's good for the country right now. Too much going on. I mean, he had COVID. He was diagnosed with COVID. He was out there campaigning in Las Vegas, and then he was like, "Oh, I have diagnosed with COVID." So, what all the people that you were hanging around with, shaking hands with, now they have COVID?
In quotation marks, he had it. We don't actually know.
Well, dude,
There's so many
I'm not sure.
different stories going around.
You can watch the videos of him getting on and off for Air Force One. That's not a good look, man. That's not a good look. So, it'll be interested to see what happens here. Definitely in the next months to come. I think the Republicans are going to have to just kind of get ready to drop the hammer here in the next month. The DNC conventions in Chicago here in about a month from now, and it's going to be interesting because you're going to see the offense. I think really realistically here, I don't think the DNC convention is going to be anywhere near as entertaining as the RNC convention. Because there's no talk. I mean, who would you like to hear at that convention? There ain't.
I got no plans to watch it, so I need to keep my blood pressure down.
Yeah, I just who are you gonna have? Maxine Waters, Jen Circleback, Psaki. And that's what I'm talking about. You have nobody. At least I was entertained for 4 days watching the RNC.
They'll find some blue hairs and some nut jobs to put on there. So
that's true, man. All righty, guys. I appreciate you listening and enjoying. Feel free to we'll probably on one more episode this month, and it is the 23rd. And then August is going to be a fun one. I got to go travel, have some fun, and see how it all plays out. Appreciate you guys joining us as always. Feel free to follow us on social media and all the fun things on YouTube, and we have some fun, Chris. I think that's one thing about this podcast is unique is we're having a blast doing it. It's always been fun. It's over the time it's gotten better, and sometimes it's gotten worse, but most of the time it's pretty good. So appreciate you, man. Take it easy, guys. All right.
Thank you for listening to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to follow us on social media via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.